Good evening, everyone. My name is Moises Esparza. I'm the exhibitions manager for the San Diego Latino Film Festival. Welcome to our 27th edition, brought to you virtually by the Eventive platform. Typically, we are watching these movies together in a movie theater, but obviously due to circumstances, we made sure that all the movies reached you at the safety of your own home. Thank you so much for all of your support during this initial opening weekend of our festival. We still have many more days to go. We wrap next Sunday, September 27th. So please spread the word about our films. If you saw a movie that you enjoyed, please tell your friends to book a ticket for the second screening. All your help is really indispensable to us in ensuring our longevity, and that eventually we get to be with you for an in-person edition. The beautiful part of this festival being virtual is that I get to engage with filmmakers from all over, many of them who would have not been able to come to the festival due to distance or project reasons. But this virtual platform has allowed us to engage with filmmakers on an unprecedented level. And for tonight's post-screening discussion of Niña Sola, we have the director, Javier Avila, here with us. Hi, Javier, how are you?
Hi, I'm very good. I hope you are too over there. And thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us, and despite any rain that's going on over there, I think we hear you fine and clear. So let's get started talking about Niña Sola. The film operates on various levels. Primarily, it's about the murder of a young girl, Cynthia, who was 19 years old when she was murdered, and that's maybe the core focus of the story, but maybe more symbolically, it can act as a microcosm for femicide and the culture of violence against women that exists not only in Mexico, but in many, many countries. Tell us a little bit about how Cynthia's story is representative of a broader issue.
Yeah, definitely. As you say, we part from the tragedy of the murder of Cynthia, but the film, my intention was to talk about an issue that can connect to a lot of issues. I mean, for me, it was important to try and connect with the audience through the adulthood of women and how they relate to their lovers or their romantic counterparts, because this tragedy could be avoided. I mean, it's a culture. I mean, and I try to stand against that type of culture where women are seen as objects. And for me, it was important to hear both of the romantic relationship stories of Cynthia's mother and Cynthia's older sister, because there's a thing in repetition, in cycles. I mean, her mother, she's from one generation, she suffered violence and abuse, and her daughters as well. And this is violence that transcends generations. I mean, it's so perpetrated in the culture that time isn't a matter for that type of. It's not I mean, it's a way of life for some people, but that works for their family system. But I mean, we have to question that, and we have to stand against it. In From what I feel.
Your documentary talks at length about different acts of violence and atrocities against women, yet it's not presented in explicit ways. It doesn't rely on, I don't know, crime scene visuals that are so common in many documentaries. Instead, you pair some of the tragic narration with, I don't know how to say this, but just everyday life montages, perhaps slices of life, maybe. Um, Tell me about this union between the words that are spoken by Cynthia's mother and her older sister, and pairing them with this maybe daily ritual sort of footage that you have throughout the documentary.
Yeah, the idea was to avoid the character talking to camera, and the audience seeing this interview, this classic style of interview. And I wanted to represent certain aspects of the story through everyday life, because I think things as so powerful in our culture as jealousy, to play this part where we know that jealousy is spread among everywhere. So that's the link between everyday life. I mean, we don't know that all the people we see walking on the streets, or live, or our neighbors, or the people we talk to on everyday life, I mean, they're probably living something that resembles our own lives and our own ways of feeling and thinking. So for me, it was important to resonate in everyday life and in strangers' lives that are probably living the same thing. Because, I mean, this movie is not statistical, but the statistics are horrible. I mean, 10 women murdered every day. That's, I mean, we have to talk about this, and we have to try to stop this, right?
We have to talk about it, but we also have to listen to, I think, the stories that these victims have. Maybe not only victims themselves, but also the family members that are might be victims themselves, as exemplified by your documentary, but who also may be reconciling their own cycles of abuse and pain that they may not be able to get out of. I don't know how, as a documentarian, you feel about being like compared to other documentaries, but in my mind, or from my perspective, um, the experience of pain that your subjects feel, I think, which joins ranks amongst, in terms of the way their story is told, joins films like Tempestad or The Devil's Freedom in making this pain really palpable and emotional. And even though we don't know these characters firsthand, we are immediately connected to their story. And I want to maybe hear a little bit more more. I want to learn more about your craft as a documentarian in terms of how you go about capturing the voices of these victims, and in many ways survivors also.
Yeah, just as you say, as I talked about the visual style, but the visual style also comprised about the uh, audio style of the film. And the primarily thing about this project is that I knew I didn't want to step in the story. I mean, I only was had like a notebook with questions that I wanted to ask, but it was never. Um, I never tried to like snuck into their lives. I mean, I the first time I met them, I sensed that what they needed was to be heard. So because nobody really had listened to them, not even family members, neighbors, or authorities, and this was like their escape, to let these things out. And it surprised me because they had never been in front of a camera or a recording like TV studio or anything. So it was very impressive to see that how they could articulate what it was going in their minds, and being able to communicate it, because you, as you say, you feel what they're saying, because it comes from the gut. I mean, and for me, that was the important thing of the film. Not as so much that the images would make you reflect. I mean, no, it was about what you were hearing, because I think that it's a very powerful way to connect with people through our guts, and not only through our eyes. So yeah, that was very important. It it
Um,
has it always was for the making of the film.
Speaking of what we listened to in the movie, I'm interested in two things. How did you capture the audio of Arcelia, and is her daughter's name is it Bertha?
Bertha, yeah.
Arcelia and Bertha. How did you capture the audio in a studio, and was it based on a question answer format, or was it more of a free thought lyrical experience where you maybe gave them a prompt? What was the structure of those recordings?
Okay, yeah. Well, for the last question, there were questions, but there were also themes. So
Okay.
I would say, what about your early years, or what about your infancy, or what about this stage in life, and or what do you think about men, or what do you think about this or that? And so there were topics, but there was also like a questionnaire. And the recording, that was, I didn't want to record this at a studio or at an office, or I asked for their permission if we could do this in their homes, because I want them to be as comfortable as possible. But that also works with another, it's like doble filo, as you say in Spanish, because it's also maybe it could be the best, but it could be also the worst place to do an interview, because we are at we're doing an interview in the place where the murder took place. So that was, for me, that was shocking, for the things I sensed as I walked in the house. And it was also very interesting to think that the day we finished the interviews, time had passed, like months had passed. And at first we couldn't, but at the last day we finally could laugh. I mean, and maybe tell funny stories between us, because like the process of the documentary kind of transformed this feeling that in the house that Arcelia doesn't want to leave. So for me, knowing that, it was important to also film the audio part of the film there, like to have the atmosphere of that place in those voices.
Maybe we, as an audience, we weren't there, obviously, for these moments of levity that you describe, but I think there is maybe a thread of hopefulness in the film, particularly in the scenes of Arcelia painting her house, or she's in the process of remodeling the home, which I think points to maybe like moving forward, restaging, reconstructing. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe I feel like her driveway was being repaved, or there was something going on outside that indicated there is a sense of newness or construction that I think your documentary maybe might have left off on. But going back for a second to this to this notion of what we hear as a viewer. Um, let's talk about the score a little bit, because I'm not sure if this is the correct term or how or what term you would use, but I found throughout different chimes that were maybe medical. I don't know. I felt like maybe that some of them sounded like a lifeline machine, just a tone, and it sounded alarming, and it sounded almost like cries of help within the score. But that might just be me over superimposing my own thoughts and like the score. So maybe share a little bit about how that came together.
Yeah, that's totally a proposal from the editor,
Mm.
because he likes to treat sound in the editing process as he treats the image. So that helped us a lot, knowing that as we filmed, I didn't expect music in the film, but I knew that there were some moments where we needed it. And when he proposed this music that has nothing to do with each artist, has nothing to do with the other, and for me, when he showed us like a rough cut of the film with these sounds, I fell in love with it, because we planned to make original music for the film, and once we heard this, we didn't want to hear anything else. But it was hard. It was hard because there wasn't any budget to buy music.
Mm.
So I had to contact each one of these artists, that someone lives in the United States or Europe or Australia, and yeah, or Spain. Yeah, that was like, I mean, they just could have said no, but there was a surprise when everyone wanted to join the project, and I mean, do this in like to help us. So yeah, that came across very. It was weird. I mean, yeah, it was weird, but we were very happy to know that this sound that we needed for the film, as you say, something can sound medical, or it can sound. I mean, the sounds when the dancing sequence. I mean, it has nothing to do with the real music that's being played at the place, but this music just makes sense in a way, like in a strange way, when you like to imagine things, when you see certain images that, like, maybe you're seeing them in a different way.
How did you initially approach Arcelia and Bertha about this documentary? And I guess you mentioned at the end of the filming there was moments of levity, but how did you? I'm guessing as a documentarian, you have to earn your subjects' trust, and with that, was there something that you said like this will help X happen, and you will feel X, or how did you approach them about being the subjects for your documentary?
This was through a friend who's a journalist that made a piece for this publication called named Zeta in Tijuana.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, I know something.
and yeah, he used to write for Zeta, and he was the only person who wrote about Cynthia. So I was doing research for this project about um, violence against women and feminicide, and I contacted him, and I because he was a friend of a friend, and I didn't knew him, and I asked him that I wanted to do this project and that I needed to meet the families of victims, and he he had saw a movie I've made, so I think that maybe I had gained his trust. and he arranged a meeting, and we went to Arcelia's house to talk about the project, and she was very receptive since the beginning. She was very open to do this, so that helped a lot, because it's awful that in a process of making a project, the person you want to work with doesn't want to work with you. So uh, because it's really private and it's really painful. But Arcelia wanted that the that people knew about what happened to Cynthia, because no one knew. The news didn't show it, the radio didn't show it, internet didn't show it. So she felt that nobody knew and only her, and she couldn't live with that pain. So she sensed that this project would help do that. And it was, yeah, it's a, for me it's a collaboration. It's not as uh, it's not as if, I mean, I'm still, obviously I'm still in touch with her, because there's this legal process that I'm trying to be there as much as I can and helping as much as I can to make justice, because that's one of the main objectives of the film. Is it really is to make justice and to have this person thrown in jail.
On the theme of justice, I guess the piece of the puzzle that maybe we haven't talked about within this documentary is the presence of Omar. Even though he's never really present, he's only talked about. How do you go about crafting his persona within your documentary?
Yeah, we knew that we didn't want to show his face, like never,
Yeah,
never. Uh, Not, I mean, thinking it in a professional way, you could say that for security reasons, maybe. But in our case, it was more for an artistic reason, as in a statement, as in we will not show his face, because everyone can be a, every man can be a murderer, every person can be a murderer. So it, what do we gain with to know how he looks like? I mean, we would only fall into this like instance of hating this face, but that wasn't the point of the film. And uh, as well as a male voice, so the point was to only like focus on the women's viewpoint. And I feel that if we had shown his face, the film maybe wouldn't feel the same.
I think maybe the masculine presence, at least in physicality in the documentary, towards the end really comes down to maybe a more innocent portrayal of masculinity with the inclusion of the shots of Bertha's sons playing and riding their skateboards. And again, my interpretation is, as a viewer, is the audience has just listened to the reality of the horrors that these women have faced at the hands of men, and then we're presented with these two young boys, and it's hard as a viewer not to push so much onto them, like, do not become like these men that have ruined your family's lives. So tell me, I guess the documentary, I don't know if it obviously doesn't end with these two young individuals, but it is kind of, they are maybe focused on towards the end of the documentary. Was there like a creative choice behind that, or what was the reason behind that?
Yeah, definitely, because they can be like the hope, as in talking about uh, young young human beings that have their future their whole future like in front of them, but it they could also lead like this path where they lose themselves and enter this like obscure atmosphere. And we wanted, well, yeah, we wanted to show this at the end because I didn't want to finish the film in such a dark place. And I prefer to think that Arcelia and Bertha, after everything they have lived, I'm sure that they will do whatever is in their hands to avoid Giovanni and his Alexis to become Omar. So yeah, that was why.
We're nearing the end of the time that we have tonight, but I guess I have a few more questions. And what takeaway do you hope people walk away with after they watch the movie? What message do you hope that they carry with them?
Well, the first thing I would say is to not discard what you have just seen and heard, because in Mexico, specifically in Tijuana, there have been showings of the film this last year where some people laugh at moments that you don't have to laugh, and some people.
So they laughed or they left? Sorry, laughed.
No, they laughed. Yeah,
Oh,
they made fun. They made fun of the characters, and
oh my God.
yeah, and it was horrible because they were present at these screenings. So
Oh,
that's really, yeah. It's horrible. I wanted to throw this people out of the theater, but that also makes you think that, well, maybe they don't believe the film and they still rather think the way they think, or they have thought all of their lives, and they rather do that because it works for them in a strange way that I don't understand. So yeah, that's the first thing, is that you have reflected on what you have just seen and heard, and hopefully, if you're not, if you don't care about these themes, you start caring about them, and you start thinking about, this is, we can't say that this is only a problem. I mean, this is a, it has a level of importance that if it doesn't change, I mean, what will be left of the women in Mexico? So, I mean, yeah, hopefully we can think about what we just saw and talk about it, because we don't always know what our family members think, or our neighbors think, or our friends think. So these are like topics we need to talk about with the people we relate to.
Yeah, I'm just an individual. We're just a film festival, but I think the power of the film is that it'll force maybe the men who watch it to think of how they've been complicit. Not that every man is a murderer, but how are we complicit in the cycle of abuse towards women through microaggressions, through behavior that we're not really aware of. Like, how do we collectively contribute to this culture, this destructive culture that's so elegantly and authentically told through your documentary? Javier, we've reached the end of our time, but do you have any last words, or any any parting words for our audience?
Hopefully not last words, but
not last words, yeah.
just that, well, Uh, I don't know. I every time I see the film, it it hurts me the same way. So I hope that people that have seen the film still uh, would like to talk about and think about these things. I mean that, and I hope that there are more films and more art expressions about this, and that we start to. I mean, in Mexico recently, there's been this like debate and confrontation about freedom of expression and
Okay.
our monuments. So, I mean, monuments don't matter, and we should start to think about expression and not the monuments itself, because no life has lesser value than a painting or a monument. I mean, so hopefully the film can also connect with everything that's happening with what's wrong in Mexico.
Well, Javier, thank you so much for sharing your documentary, for having this dialogue with me. Such an important film to watch, and it's really an honor as a film festival to be able to celebrate it. I wish you all the best in future endeavors, and I hope that this documentary is seen far and wide, because I think it speaks to systemic issues regarding the oppression of women, perhaps in this documentary in Mexico regionally, but really could speak to how we treat women on a more macro level around the world. Thank you so much, Javier. I hope to speak to you soon. And thank you again.
No, thank you, Moises, and thank you to the festival for inviting the film. Thank you, and have a good night.
Hope to talk to you soon. Bye-bye.